Okay, guys, so good morning. Let's start our day 4. The good news is that we are more than halfway through our lectures. So I'm expecting this part to be more practical oriented rather than just being theoretical oriented. So you guys will get a chance to practice a lot as well as basically do a lot of manipulations using Excel. Because again, this program, it's all about marketing analytics in Excel, not in Python or R. So we will be primarily focusing all our efforts using Excel. So first of all, thank you all for your submissions for the assignment number 1. Hope you guys find it interesting, as well as a kind of like a good summary to recap everything we throughout day 1, 2, and 3, as well as you got a chance to practice some awesome skills in terms of how to write and how to describe those segments. So thank you for doing that. So just a quick reminder, because again, the format of our course is online. We have time zone differences and everything related to it. So first of all, please, oops. Okay, you guys first of all can see my screen. Thumb up so I can see it. Okay, thank you. So 1 second, something's going on with my guy. 1 moment. Oops. Okay, so right before we start, first of all, when you guys joining the call, please mute yourself and remain muted as long as you don't have any questions. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me and just to kind of like engage in the process. When you have a question, please start with, sorry, I have a question, because again, we have a different internet connection issues. We may have some sort of bandwidth issues. So you start saying something and then I'm getting your response over the time, delayed response over the time. So it will help me, first of all, to address your question, as well as to understand that maybe a person having some sort of issues on his or her end. When you guys responding to the question, let's use 333 rule. So basically, we start with sensor response based on lecture's question. And then once I notice that it's not sufficient enough or further explanations required, I will ask you to provide like a short in-depth description or short in-depth explanations. So you will have 30 seconds. And again, if that is not enough, please use the next 3 minutes just to explain everything in depth explicitly. And again, everything starts with respect, because first of all, it's a bit challenging time and we're all trying to adapt. And I know that some people are joining and new people joining our call today and for the following days. So just to make sure that we have these rules in place. Plus, again, I believe I'm very responsive to all your inquiries via email. So if you have any questions or just occasionally recall something and you haven't gotten a chance to ask me or to discuss about, feel free to send me an email so I can address that. So basically our agenda for today. So as I mentioned, from before, we will be primarily working with different calculations and a lot of hands-on practices. So for our lecture number 10, 11, and 12, it's all about metrics. So first hour, we will be discussing digital marketing analytics, key concepts, why it's useful, and how to define and decide which metrics we should analyze as well, track and measure in terms of digital marketing analytics, of course, but again, it's applicable to your day-to-day activities. Then just a quick refresher on key financial and marketing metrics, because all of you guys came from different backgrounds, and we want to make sure that, first of all, you are well equipped in terms of assignments which are coming, so assignment 2 and assignment 3, as well as you are able to learn something new and implement it to your day-to-day practices at your work. And basically we will be finishing our day with in-class exercise, or better to say, in-class case assignment, not assignment, just a case. So you will get a chance to practice channel analytics based on search and paid search case used basically based on Google Ads. And the optional, we also will be having a guest speaker from 7 to 8:20 Kiev local time. Her name is Anna Maria Sabov, and her lecture will be HR Analytics. Lecture will be in Ukrainian. Any questions? Or so far so good. We are doing well, and based on assignment, everything we discussed, there are no other questions, and we're good to move to our topic number 1. Terrific. Thank you, guys. And again, as always, feel free to use the chat or feel free to jump in and basically ask your question in person. Just don't forget to unmute yourself. So, coolio, let's get to it. So, digital marketing analytics, key concepts. So, first of all, I just want to be crystal clear on the definitions, because everything starts with definition. Why digital analytics is different from digital marketing analytics, and why we differentiate digital marketing analytics from marketing analytics overall. So if you look at the perspective of or definitions of the digital analytics, Avinash Kaushik, so he is one of the Google evangelists. So basically the person responsible for Google Analytics, that wonderful tool I got a chance to show you, I believe on day 2, if I'm not mistaken. So he was basically the first person who came up with definition of digital marketing, digital analytics, which we predominantly use in our day-to-day practices. So basically digital analytics is simple as that. It's the analysis of qualitative and quantitative data from your businesses and the competition to drive a continual improvement of the online experiences that you customers and potential customers have, which translates to your desired outcomes, both offline and online. So simple as that. And when we are talking about marketing analytics, it's a kind of like reiteration of everything which was mentioned. And I believe you will find it very similar to everything we've discussed so far. So the definition of digital marketing analytics is next. It is translation of customer behavior into actionable business data. Today's marketers can use digital analytic tools to examine many of the channels that your buyers or customers are interacting with, and basically identify new revenue opportunities coming either from new campaigns or basically on such advanced techniques like customer segmentation, then basically the definition and the brainstorming ideas for the new strategies implementation, then tactical execution of those strategies, and therefore yada yada yada, tactical and channel optimization. So everything is similar. So when we just add the kind of like the prefix word of digital to existing word marketing analytics, it will be just considered that something which is going on online, or at least can be recorded online, in contrast to something that we used to do offline, or for example the things that which weren't actually presented in a digital format, or in a expressed in a digital way. So I believe you remember this scheme by heart by now, because again, as I was mentioning, it's basically one of the most important slides for this course. Basically the understanding on which stage of your digital marketing transformation or digital marketing excellence you are at, in order to understand that, for example, for your particular business, it is crucial to, for example, if you're on a stage 2, developing capability, crucial to understand what kind of KPIs you are measuring. So for example, volume-based KPIs, rather than just having a measurement framework all across value-based KPI and weighted attribution. So first things first, remember, you need to understand where you are on this scale, or your business or your company you're working with, in order to understand that, okay, I need these sets of KPI to be analyzed, properly measured, as well as having some sort of sanity check. So over the time, I need to perform and to compare how well we are doing versus today versus our efforts a year or 2 years ago. And throughout this progression, you will be able to see that something which was relevant to you a year ago or 2 years ago is no longer crucial for your business as of today and may not be the case moving forward 2 or 3 years in the future. But once you reach the point of stage number 5, so kind of like market leading capacity, you will understand that overall, from having a lifetime from being focused on lifetime value KPIs, you'll be focused on all KPIs at the previous stages, but at the same time, the main emphasis will still remain on the lifetime value KPIs. So why I'm saying that? So imagine next situation. You have a customer, you have a group of customers, and you have estimated the lifetime value, and we will talk about that, I believe, today as well as tomorrow. But you also running a significant number of campaigns, basically either social ads or is something like offline, etc. So you need to make sure that the measurement of and optimizations of those campaigns still happening. So you will be dealing with two separate entities. So one entity would be your customer related optimizations or customer related analytics, such as customer lifetime value. But on another part of the equation, you'll be having something like the understanding and measurement of your acquisition cost, and then the proper allocation of those acquisition costs to all your efforts when it comes to understanding your customer lifetime value. Because again, if you have all your profitability as well as pro formas well organized and you are able to trace back and to get all the information per customer. So for example, how much money you spent on the customer, how much money you spent to retain the customer, how much money you spent to reactivate the customer, then most likely you are doing well and you are successful overall. But understanding that something is maybe broken or something is not properly measured is crucial. So you would need to understand per which stage of your digital marketing excellence or transformation, again, per this slide, you are at in order to understand what are the crucial KPIs or what are the crucial performance indicators you need to hit or you need to be oriented to in order to improve the state of things as they are right now, in order for you to transition from stage, for example, 2 to stage 3, and therefore become a leader in your market niche. So far, so good. Any questions? Okay, thank you. So let's get some speed because again, I don't want to become too repetitive and don't want you guys to be bored. So basically, when we are talking about the full picture of digital marketing analytics, we are trying to reiterate three main aspects of all our broad categories used in our business when we are talking about our customers. Remember, I was mentioning originally that marketing analytics is just a part of the equation. We also need to speak about the customer or the customer values, as well as, for example, a bit of financial analytics and financial results behind that equation in order to have this well-oiled machine working, being able to work properly and well synchronized. So it's kind of like gears when they're coming all together and working simultaneously. So when we're talking about digital marketing analytics, we're trying to understand three things. First of all, relationship between different marketing channels. So for example, radio, paid search, display advertising, radio, some sort of like a bump ads, your ads, ads you may see on YouTube, etc., etc., etc. But at the same time, we need to stay focused and stay centered on people-centric data based on buyer's journey. So customer journey mapping exercise. That one is also facilitates the process and should be included in the process, as well as revenues. Point number three, attributed to specific marketing efforts. So understanding how much money each channel generates for your business, as well as the customers which are coming from a particular channel, like attribution related thing, as well as the relationship between different marketing channels in order whether it supports customer journey or facilitates customer journey on a certain given point or not is crucial. So all those three aspects are covered in digital marketing analytics. So you may hear a lot the terms marketing analytics and digital marketing analytics used interchangeably, and it's not some sort of like a typo. It's a normal thing because the way we are progressing that right now, it's all becomes measured and tracked digitally. So that's why marketing analytics at its core, it has basic principles which are applicable to digital marketing analytics. But because we are measuring all our efforts in a digital way, that's why we are still sticking with the definitions like digital marketing analytics rather than just marketing analytics. So there are three main buckets when we are talking about digital analytics, and I believe you guys remember our our sales funnel and the progression. So because when we divide sales funnel into three main categories and talking what are the most kind of like engaged or the most engaging segments we are having the most exposure to, it would be awareness, engagement, and action. Simple as that. We like if we don't go too deep into categories, we are dealing with everything, all interaction at the awareness, engagement, and action stages. But at the same time, we need to know how, first of all, the progression from awareness stage comes to engagement stage, and then from engagement to action stage. So in other words, we are trying to optimize the process and being interested in optimizing things which are not broken. So basically, I believe many of you have heard that phrase, fix it unless broken. And basically, it's a part of the deal here. We are trying to understand the relationship between how one channel or how one effort or interaction support another interaction in order to facilitate the process. Giving you an example. So we are considering acquiring certain number of customers for our business over the next 2 months. So we decided to launch some sort of awareness campaigns using radio. But at the same time, we are targeting auto drivers. So maybe some people are not listening radio. That's normal. That's a part of the deal. But we know that the people are driving in these particular locations. So we may want to put out of house advertising like a big banners you may see when you're driving on the road and they kind of like on the side in order to support your messaging or in order to increase ad recall. So we would consider those two formats on radio and OOH, out of house advertising, as the two separate formats of advertising, but they serve the same process, the same purpose. They are meant to facilitate all our efforts at the awareness stage in order either to increase ad recall at the awareness stage or either to support or to engage with the people who are particularly being targeted at that stage. So when we're talking about digital marketing analytics and planning measurement frameworks, it all comes to the situation. So first of all, again, we by main part, we need to understand what our current strategy, what our current positioning, as well as what is our current vision. So what can really help us in that process, it would be Raise digital marketing planning framework. Again, there are like, I would say probably endless number of frameworks. It's just to put it into perspective and to explain it to you guys. So you can basically adjust to yourselves. So when we are talking and the progressing from a very top stage, so if we're talking about like a situation analysis, we want to understand how well are we using digital media now, or how much money digital media generates to us. So basically, we're just saying that, okay, because we were running certain ads or being reaching to the people at the certain efficiency, are we really using our digital media in the right way? And in order to understand that, we need to have certain objectives, or certain business goals in place. Because in order to measure something, we need to have something that we are measuring against. So, for example, we achieved the result of 10 sales qualified leads over last month. Is it good or bad? We don't know. But if we know that our goal for example, for April 2020 was to achieve 15 sales qualified leads, but we are at the stage of 10 as of now, it's probably not the right way for us to discontinue all our efforts at this point. So what we need to do is basically reassess, re-engage, reiterate our goals in order to think, okay, so we were originally planning to achieve a number of 20 sales qualified leads by using in-depth targeting, like contextual targeting based on the segmentation analysis we conducted a while ago. But maybe we can improve our integrated multi-channel communications in order to facilitate the process and bring more traction into the business. So it's just some examples to think of, because again, it's a very complex process. And when it comes to saying that, okay, our marketing, marketing, digital marketing measures are sufficient enough, we need to understand what is our goal, how we are trending against our goal, as well as to understanding business and marketing goals for the particular year and for the particular channel or for the particular campaign. So we can say confidently that we are doing well versus no, we need to optimize something. Because what will essentially impact is the division, or basically the allocation of all our efforts. If we're talking about like just reach as a reach stage of our sales funnel, basically very top stage, when we are trying to build the awareness about our value proposition, it may be both offline or online. Most likely that we will be dealing with next six categories or next six channels or next six types of marketing. So search engine optimization, SEO, pay-per-click, PPC campaigns, paid search, affiliate and co-marketing partnerships, for example, online advertising, display ads, those banners I continuously talking about, online PR, social media and marketing. It's just top of the funnel, the reach stage. So for the reach stage, of course, all your metrics and all your measurement framework will be built around these categories or these channels. But if we are progressing towards act and convert stages, so basically we are trying to convert it to facilitate the conversion process for our leads in order them to become like sales qualified leads or basically closing the sale. We will be dealing mostly with customer journey maps for both desktop and mobile devices, with the content marketing automation, such as, for example, emails or some sort of like SMS blasts, or different tools you may be using, or different automation tools you may be using, such as like chatbots if you're using Telegram or Facebook and other platforms. Merchandising and personalization, how well you're basically presenting your items or goods in person to the particular stores, like, for example, certain product demos, conversion rate optimizations, per channel efforts or per funnel efforts. So saying that you achieved or you acquired the marketing qualified lead at this stage because the person was well interacting with all your social media marketing efforts. So, for example, you launch a blog post and you are advertising, uh, um, let's say, some sort of like a fashion, like apparel goods, and the person became interested in your products. So, because of the content generated on your social media, for example, Pinterest, beautiful pictures, well designed, beautiful coloring, your prospect at this point lead decided to interact and landed on your website. On your website you having tons of information about why your product is different, that your apparel or item specification. So for example, made with this material in this country, environmentally friendly, 100% cotton, etc., etc., etc. So it kind of helps them to understand and to facilitate the customer journey. If, for example, person is interested in product which are environmentally friendly, um, made in Ukraine, you're facilitating the process of collection and data exploration at that point in order that person to decide whether she or he will buy a product from you or not based on the specification he or she is having in mind. And how you can facilitate the process, imagine next situation. Person added particular item to his or her bucket in your on your website and about to check out, but all of a sudden they decided to bounce because there were some distractions at the home or some other reasons we are not aware of. How we can re-engage or how we can basically facilitate or remind the person that she or he was about to buy something and maybe it's a problem with the price or something else, we can send them a personalized offer, like saying, yeah, we saw you added this item and you were about to buy but you haven't bought it, so what's the reason? And in order to help you out, we can provide you certain discounts for certain products, like similar product one, two, three, or maybe you want to book a call with our agent who can explain uh, some product specifications in order for you, in order to help you decide whether this product is something you've been looking for or not. And therefore, when we are talking about marketing automation here, it would be the proper measurement of all our communications in terms of the facilitation of this kind of like a journey progression. And when we're talking about the last stage, engage, or I would say not the stage, or more like a category, we are talking about increasing the number of repeat visits and sales. So think about it in the next way. You acquired a customer. Customer is basically first time buyer. So they bought one product from you and never came back. You spent, let's say, $20 to acquiring that customer. You made $25 of that customer. And in the rough numbers, you made $5 as a profit, as your revenue based per customer. But you know that the person may buy from you at least 3 times for example, per year, or this particular year. So you can increase the average revenue from your customer 5 plus 25 times 3. So basically would be 75, almost $80. Again, rough numbers, but just to give you the perspective. So is it worth spending 10 extra dollars to re-engage, to basically remind and to encourage person to work with your company if it can generate you 80, or maybe because you're spending extra $10, $70 of revenue instead of just having $5 as a revenue? Of course, it makes sense. So in order to do that, you would need to go and to work with your customer contact strategy. So how and when you will be contacting your customers when you're seeing that they are not interacting well as just to making sure that the initial onboarding experience with the item. So for example, your customer receives the package and he or she knows for sure that what they have to do, for example, how to unwrap it, how to, for example, assemble it, if it's some sort of like a IKEA furniture, which comes to your house, as well as who on your company's end, like a customer support agent, can answer any questions your customer may have at a certain point in order to bring them a positive experience, which all will be transferred into something like this. Essentially, you getting a person with a strong purchase intent whom you're converting into person who purchased something from you. So it's a first time purchase. But then what you're trying to do, you're trying to make them basically lapsing in your loyalty loop or maybe your interaction loop. So over the time, all your customers may become indecisive or deactivated or deactive customers. So you need to make sure that you have enough tools, support, and channels in order to reactivate your customers, in order to make them more more likely to be repeat customers, and then over the time they can become loyal customer. So why we are talking a lot about media and the importance of media? Because again, 4 or 3 or whatever the number of stages is, each stage of the sales funnel journey, or basically just a customer journey, responsible for something. And it is something that we need to be accountable for. Because when we start at the reach very top funnel, we are talking about certain number of channels we can use to reach our customers. So we are talking about television, radio, and print. So which is pretty much like a physical or offline, if we're considering it that way. But when we are talking about display, search, SEO, and content marketing, and even influencer outreach, it all of a sudden becomes digital, becomes measurable in sort of like a digitalized way. So the biggest challenge is to have the proper measurement framework in a place so you are able to measure all your channels at the same time, for example, reach or act or convert or engage stage in place. So you knowing that at the same time you have 3 active paid media channels, 2 active, for example, earned media channels, and for example, certain places where or certain platforms where people speak about their personal experience. So all those channels separately all of a sudden becomes something that impacts someone else's decision whether they can buy your product or not, because they've heard about your product, let's say in the web, they read reviews about your product, and then they realize that probably, yeah, your product was giving a shot. So that's why they decided to buy. And then you're getting the first time of purchasers who over the time, if you have a proper measurement and the proper tracking systems in place, marketing automation systems, can be re-engaged, re-encouraged to make a repetitive purchase. And all it's over the time, if again, all your systems and all your channels are well configured, well-oiled machine, they all will become loyal customers. So far, so good. Not too boring. Everything makes sense. Come on, guys. Need to see a bit of your feedback because it's me talking alone. Okay, sweet. Thank you. So, theory, I'm tired also, but let's talk about something more KPI and more metric related. I knew you guys wanted. So, first of all, you need to understand, as I mentioned, what is the particular metric you're trying to track. So, tracking metrics. For example, if it's important for you to be focused on visitors acquisition, most likely you will be tracking metrics like unique visitors and new visitors. But at the same time, think about it as a metrics. You having columns sorted or organized as your particular objective, marketing objective. And then at the row level, you having sets of supportive evidences or supportive facts or things you need to be kind of like accountable for as well, keeping those in mind in order how to effectively uh, measure and optimize and as well as track your KPIs at any given level. So if we're talking about your objective as visitor acquisition, so most likely that your tracking metrics will be unique visitors and new visitors solely at that point. So for you performance drivers or some sort of like your diagnostics KPIs at that point, maybe bounce rate, conversion rate, new visit to start, and maybe quotes. Because again, you want to understand that, okay, overall, I may be trying to achieve particular number of the people for this particular stage. But at the same time, I need to know how well they are interacting with the website. Because if you think in kind of like long-term goal, you're having tactical versus strategical objectives. Tactical that, for example, I have landing page, which is responsible for, or the main objective of that landing page is to encourage people to submit a quote, but landing page is not well optimized. It's not user friendly, so the bounce rate is very high, and the people are not actually spending much time on that, so meaning quote. But from another perspective, you're dealing with a completely different sets of metrics. You're dealing with a number of leads, you're dealing with acquisition costs. So these two sets of metrics are not directly related to each other, but they are supporting each other. Bounce rate as an indication of user or web experience, and conversion rates, indication of how well you're converting your customers, for example, from sales qualified to customers stages. So again, something to be accountable for. Business value, KPIs, audience share. You are into reaching or acquiring 10% of your total market size. It's a huge number, right? But if you're at the 8% and you're trying to optimize your efforts at the channel level, we are talking about landing pages, it will support you in the long run. So understanding the difference between tactical metrics and strategical metrics is important here. So many times it would be kind of like back and forth conversation because you want to make sure that the initial foundation is well built in order to build something on that foundation and therefore progress towards your higher target, which again would be your desire of achieving 10% of the total market size. So for visitors acquisition strategy or potential strategies may be targeted reach strategy. So you're just reaching out to people because of the specifications you found on Facebook or on Twitter, or offline targeted reach strategy, people living in that particular area or listening to the particular radio stations. So you know that your desired customer resides there. And then tactics, or how you can execute those initiatives in terms of acquiring new visitors. So basically, it just different campaigns or one campaign ran on the different platforms in order to reiterate as well as to support different messaging as well as online value proposition. So sign up now using these particular codes and get 10% off. Something like that also possible. But then when we're talking about other stages, and again, I won't go too deep into those, just to give you guys a sense of example and sense of a touch. Conversion to opportunity, we are talking about lead generation strategy. So our business value would be number of orders. So we're getting the share of the audience who is hearing us, or at least someone's attention. So for example, 10%. But then we are trying to convert that into order amount. And for that, we are using tactics like personification, so usability, or maybe context strategy. We are offering personalized support in order to understand their needs better, in order to convert them better from the stage of sales qualified lead to the opportunity or to close actual sale. But then we also have a separate stage, conversion to sale. So that stage helps us to facilitate the process of conversion from opportunity to close sale even further. So we will be dealing with something like online sale generation strategy. So it is very similar to the previous stage, but you see that the metrics and the, for example, performance diagnostics metrics, they change. So if we were having like customer centric KPIs, cost per opportunity and customer satisfaction at conversion to opportunity stage, so all of a sudden we are getting cost per sale, customer satisfaction, and average order value metrics for conversion to sale stage. So again, something that can be used interchangeably based on your business format, business model, as well as the way you're running marketing. Not confusing, doing well. Thumb up so I can see you guys. Yep, thank you. Again, not gonna focus on this one for a while, but just to kind of like reiterate and remind you guys that we may be dealing with different interactions per different stage. The way that the marketing funnel, sales funnels are defined, maybe in a multiple different ways, but the idea has to be the same. You need to understand what is like the top of the funnel, reach stage, which stages are similar to act engage, and which stages are very similar to basically everything sales related. So it will impact significantly your measurement framework. And when I'm talking about measurement framework, if you put these colors into perspective, those colors can be as separate stages of your marketing funnel, but it can be very similar to your existing marketing funnel. So when we are talking about the proper measurement, we are talking about something related to the measurement of your activities per, for example, top of the funnel stages like reach, impressions, keyword searches, as well as visitors and page views. Because if you remember these slides, we're interested in visitors acquisition. So share of voice, number of unique visitors, and new visitors who come into our website. But when we kind of like achieved that amount of media coverage, that amount of attention, we want to make sure that we have a proper engagement, the proper interaction on our side. So the experience our visitors are having is positive. So bounce rate is one of the most probably like obvious ways or obvious metrics may be referring to. So basically the number of users who bounce, who close the website or your page and don't come back. So basically discontinue the session at any given point of time. So we are interested in optimizing our efforts at this point. So it's our performance drivers like bounce rate or conversion rate per page. And then we have progressed from the middle of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. So we interested in the proper transition into conversion rates, which will be measured, for example, number of prospects, number of actual sales conversion, like actual customers, number of repeated sales, so repeat loyal customers, as well as understanding whether there are any advocates of our products. So for example, person purchased the product, then started advertising that product to others or recommending that product to other people in order to, first of all, share his or her experience using that product and therefore impacting our sales numbers. So again, don't think about your digital marketing metrics or the metrics you're going to use as something static. Everything starts with a strategy, but it has to be fueled by data. So only in that collaboration, you're getting, again, that well-oiled machine, which will work for your favor. Whew. So what is going on with my screen? First time I've seen this. Okay. You guys can still see my screen, right? I'm assuming yes. Yeah, thank you. So basically, because of the progression we are starting with, we are starting with reach, and reach is a top funnel. It's all about reaching attention of our desired audience. So we want to make sure that for all those channels, we're using right metrics. And again, those metrics are not written in stone. They are very flexible. You always can bring something new. I'm just providing you guys basics, because basics here is something considered as something crucial to know, important to know, that you can proceed further on your own because of based on the things you are having for your company. So some metrics just to highlight: reach, so it would be the number of unique people or household in the audience you are capable, either capable of reaching or you already reached. So you may think about reach as like overall, like something like a total market size or your desired audience, as well as the reach achieved or number of people achieved by your particular campaign, marketing campaign. Then frequency, it's usually something again on the both sides. So you may set up your ad frequency of 4 ads per person per day, or you have no control over the frequency whatsoever, and it all kind of up to your lead, up to your prospect, or how much exposure he or she will be having to your ad. Again, that example with out of house banner on the street right beside the road. Person is driving in that area frequently, therefore the frequency will be increasing to that particular person. So instead of just commuting, maybe like or driving 2 times per year banner twice a day on his or her way to work and back to home, they kind of driving frequently. So the frequency is immediately increasing for that particular person. And then basically rating points, opportunities to see gross rating points and target rating points. It is something that mostly will be entailed when you're working with your reputation on the mass scale, as well as trying to evaluate how well your audience interacting or their perception about ads. Again, not commonly used, but just something to think of. Cost per mille or CPM. It's one of the most important metrics, and you will hear about that very often. It's either CPM or CPC, cost per click. So basically, it is the way of platforms or the way for marketers, first of all, to build the value proposition or the quote on, for example, you're interested in reaching 10,000 people. For reaching 10,000 people, you are estimating that you would need, let's say, 100,000 impressions. Impression here, it is considered the number of viewings. So you saw the ad, you got an impression. So that's one. If you drive, or if you're driving, or if you see that banner or ad again, it's the second time you have a second impression. So the number of impression would be a number of showings. And CPM here would be the sorry, the number of the amount of money you spend for your audience per 1,000 impressions. And because of it's calculated not per one impression, because again, it's a bit hard to estimate, especially in online marketing. Vendors like Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest, they prefer to deal with larger quantities of impressions. So it would be measured in thousands. So CPM here would be cost per 1,000 impression. And again, you will hear this metric a lot throughout this course. However, when we are progressing towards something more valuable to us, so for example, cost per lead, cost per acquisition, we are referring to slightly different metrics. We are all of a sudden talking about lead generation. So then we will be measuring the numbers of how much money we spend per acquiring a lead, as well as how much money we are acquiring per customer. So those numbers are our internal numbers, because again, we are keeping our financial formulas internally. So we are the only one who knows for sure how much money we spend and how many customers we acquired over the time. So those numbers, cost per lead and cost per acquisition, it is something that we calculate internally, and you won't be able to basically go to the certain platform and to ask that platform to provide for you. Click-through rate. Again, as I mentioned, we are dealing with impressions. So the number of, for example, times or occurrences you saw the ad, but at the same time, we're interested in knowing how many people clicked on those ads, so number of clicks. But at the same time, we're interested in value or the conversion value of our clicks, click-through rate. So let's say out of 1,000 impression, we got, let's say, 20 people clicking on our ad. So that means that our click-through rate is 2%. So is it the good number? Is it the great number? Is it sufficient number? Well, it's up to us to decide based on, first of all, platform or format benchmark, both internal or external. So external, it is platform benchmark. So people on average interact at 1.3% with this format of ads, but at the same time, we may have our internal benchmarks. So for example, we know that we have a very well-rounded, well-stacked team of creatives. So that team of designers, they can produce very impactful creatives, so the people will interact with them better than an average with similar ad format on a different platform. So therefore, our benchmark is higher. And we will talk about that, I believe, on day 2, on how to build and frame the benchmark measurement framework and the system within our organization. So far, so good, not really tiring. I guess I'm just talking a lot. I'm not seeing your responses, guys. Okay, thank you. So when we are talking about, okay, tools and products we may want to use, there is no right or wrong answer. It all comes to your business objective as well as to your stock of products you are having at any given point of time. So if we're thinking about like, okay, I'm just interested in tracking and measuring the number of unique visitors or visitors to our website, you most likely will be using Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics products. And the reason for those are probably the most commonly used, and they are probably most affordable. Canis, can you explain rating points? It's not really the part of the course, but I will explain it later on when we will be talking about our case. I believe it would be day 3. So I will keep that in mind. Thank you. So Google Analytics is a most affordable product for measuring all our on-site interactions, which our site visitors may take or may use or may engage with. So think about that in the next way. You have page 1, 2, 3, and 4. So then you are interested in knowing the number of the people who progressed from page 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the following order. But sometimes you may have a people who just visited page 1 and page 4. You have the website, but if you don't have something which will be measuring your visitors' interactions with the website, it's not really crucial, because then all of a sudden your measurement framework, your measurement system is broken. So in fact, it's crucial for you to measure those and to have all those numbers in place. Because if you want to, for example, optimize your conversion rate or create better personalized offers, better personalized pages, you would need to run either A/B tests like a prototyping, or you would need to create a separate personalized experience. And in order to do that, you would need to use tools like Optimizely, like Adobe Target, or other products which may help you to build very statistically important A/B tests, or just run some personalification tests, basically just trying to see whether this page will look greater or better than the previous one. When we are talking about voice of customer, I believe many of you have heard about sentiment analysis on or natural language processing. So that part or that group of products will help you to capture that information. Because if you're looking at the major websites, very often you have some sort of like a pop-up window saying like, okay, rate your experience today from scale 1 to 5, as well as just to basically share your experience, typing some comments. So when you type in those comments will be collected and organized into data sets, or basically into like structured by these products like Usabilla or Medallia. So for example, I used to work with Usabilla a lot. So you're getting everything structured in CSV files, basically cells and columns. And then you're able to analyze that data on your end in order to come up with some ideas for personification and A/B testing. If we are talking about performance monitoring, again, your diagnostic KPIs, you want to set up certain signals, or you want to set up certain messages. Like, for example, the number of people who were visiting your website over last 7 days, comparing to your baseline, and the baseline you're taking as the average value of previous 30 days before last week, has dropped by, let's say, 10%, which is something concerning. So you would need to address it. Or it may be like performance monitoring on the market overall related to your competitors. So it all comes to the definitions and the things you want to use. When we are talking about database management platforms, DMP, CDP, TMS systems, it all comes on how you're organizing the data. Because if you think about digital analytics tools like Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics, it's just a part of the equation, because it provides you with the value of or with numbers from site experiences, but those site experience or site interactions may not be directly or indirectly converted into to your sales numbers. So in other words, you getting 100 visitors per day, but out of those 100 visitors, if you are not able to attribute your sales to particular visitors or group of visitors, that means that your system somehow is a bit broken. So you would need to basically piece together information from several different data sources into one database in order to say that, okay, I'm able to attribute the conversion results for, let's say, this group of people over last 7 days versus that group of people. And I can understand how profitable that group of people is over group of people number 2. So basically our segmentation analysis. So, and then it all kind of comes to e-commerce and the marketing clouds products. So whatever the stack you have, you should use it, but it all comes to your objective. I see some questions. Okay, Kenneth, I'm interested in the balance of metrics, internal versus externally supplied, especially now there is more news that Facebook metrics may not be accurate. There, I fear that other metric suppliers are doing the same. Good question. So I believe I can answer your question into a slide. So bear with me, please. So now we are start talking about web analytics. So as you guys can see, that everything starts with web analytics because we need to tie it to our offline performance, to our financial numbers. So because web analytics is digital analytics are not exactly the same, they go kind of like, they come hand in hand. So if you have a proper tracking hygiene metrics, or basically just the data governance procedures in place, which help you to capture all relevant information, you will be able to understand user behavior better. And that user behavior will transform into enabling certain digital marketing tactics for your particular company. And therefore, it will help you to drive your business strategy. So essentially, if you think in a very high level or from a very top level view, you can think about next definitions being used in Google Analytics. So we are talking about number of users, new users, sessions, page views, and unique page views. But you cannot say that those numbers make sense if you don't have the accurate data recorded in your tracking systems. So for example, you know that certain pages are not available in Google Analytics. 404, page is not available. So if the page is not available, that raises a problem or creates a problem for your tracking and measurement efforts. Because if one particular page is not available, your user experience is broken. So if the person at the particular stage of the customer journey is interested in, for example, product offerings, for example, like per this funnel, or better to say, one second, per this funnel, you may be converting a person, for example, at the landing page, but then when the person wants to land on a homepage is not available, or the tracking of number of visitors from landing page coming to homepage is broken, you're getting the wrong numbers. Therefore, garbage in and garbage out. So the number of metrics you are interested in tracking will be very different based on, again, your objective. And when we are talking about which metrics should be used or track, it's a very interesting question, because you need to understand if, for example, click-through rate is really crucial for your business or not. If it's crucial, why it's crucial. So for example, click-through rate is not crucial metric, but it does support your business objective. How does it support? Well, you need to make sure the conversion rate or the progression of your users from the awareness stage. So for example, ads on Facebook, which are going to your landing page, and then from the landing page, which are going to the homepage of your website, is well defined, as well as messaging is sufficient enough to support that progression. So for example, your ad on Facebook, limited time offer, click here to get your discount. User clicks, gets redirected to your landing page, but on landing page, it's not, basically there is no information about that promo offer of 10% discount for people. So will they click and to progress to the home page in order to use that promo code or whatever the offer you're having? Unlikely, because the customer experience will be broken. Therefore, they won't be able to convert it. So quick answer is track everything you can. The better answer is track everything which is aligned with goals of your organization. And if something not quite obvious for you at the particular point of time, whether it aligns with your company's objective, like for example, video completion rate for your ads, well, if you know that it helps you to generate your brand image, track it. But if it's something like, for example, number of saves or saved button clicks, for example, on Pinterest, when you add those two collections, it's not really helpful to your business. It's just a number of engagements. Number of engagements is calculated as engagement rate on the interaction side. Number of saved clicks wouldn't be relevant. So you won't be interested in saving that information. So don't track it. And the coolest thing about digital marketing, segmentation always possible. If you, again, if you have a very sufficient infrastructure and system in place. So the coolest thing about segmentation in marketing overall, the value of first-time visitors versus repeat visitors is different. So during our first part of these lectures, we were doing segmentation analysis in two ways. First of all, we were assuming under assumption that we have collected all information about our visitors via surveys, via some sort of like polls, but then we were using that information in order to create segments based on their properties. However, and you guys also have access to it, we can do some things, in Google Analytics, again, as a tool we commonly use. So Kenneth, I do remember about your question, and bear with me, it's gonna be next slide, promise. So the coolest thing about user segmentation in all those platforms like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, you can create segments by yourself. So coming back to the slide on the page, 1 second, 12. Based on the stage, you need to understand that, for example, unique visitors and new visitors and repeat visitors is your goal. You're interested in those. Not a problem. Here we go. We're just adding a segment, and then we can configure how we want to define our segment. So for example, we're interested in new users only. So users who came to our website. Again, guys, it's for the demonstration purposes, and this is demo account on Google Analytics. So numbers may be slightly off, but just giving you the general logic. So we want to just isolate the performance numbers or apply new user segment to see the number of those people. And for example, based on our goals, we may see that the number of 90% of new users is positive for our business. How come is that? So if we are some sort of like, for example, media blog, which drives users to, for example, landing or sign up pages for our info products, that would be a good result. So that means that the number of people potentially who kind of come to our pages and converting at, let's say, 10% rate is high. It's a great result. So that means that 90% is our desired numbers, and we are against it. 99.5% is actually a good result. But what if we are dealing with something different? So for example, we are interested in seeing that number of people who came organically to our website versus the number of people who came from the paid media. And at the same time, can be new users or like another group of users. So we're seeing that majority of our visitors per this setup, of course, basically 97% are all users who came organically. So that means that the number of users coming from organic channel given to our exposure is really significant. Therefore, if we're transforming into business insights, that means that only 3% of all our, that all our advertising efforts are accountable only for 3% of all new users coming to our website. And when we are transforming that insight or that finding into like numerical or money expressions, we can say that, for example, new user for our website costs, let's say, 6 cents. But in long term, we are converting users at 20% conversion rate, and out of 100 users whom we are spending $6 on, we are getting, let's say, 20 users who pay, let's say, $10 per subscription. 10 times 20 equals $200. And if we subtract the number of the amount of money we spent on acquiring or basically bringing those people to the website, so we will be dealing with $200 minus 6 cents times 1,000. So it would be something like, again, if I'm not mistaken in my numbers, $6 or $60 as spent versus $200 as the revenue. So when we are talking about like the net income in this particular case, it would be $200 minus $60. $140 is a net profit. Is it the good result? Again, I don't know. It's up to you to decide. But overall, I would say probably yes. So the segmentation is everything, is the key for everything we do, because the way you will entail and basically frame your conversation as well as your messaging with the user, it will be all about the segments you're using. So instead of being the one who has no control over your segment, in digital analytics, you become the one who is in control of your segments and the way you can interact with those people. Just a matter of knowing, first of all, the infrastructure and the segment properties. So you had your segmentation analysis ready. For example, similar segmentation analysis for assignment 1. So then you're able to transform those findings into segments on your website in order to create either better personalized experience or better offers tiled particular to that particular segment. Make sense? Thumb up so I can see it. All right. Just something to think about. But yeah, it's all the part we will be discussing. So Kenneth, back to your question. So Kenneth was asking on the reliability of information on all platforms. And basically, it's kind of like an ongoing problem. So let me first of all just take you guys through this slide. So data available in your platforms, and let me add plus third parties, is not always available and accurate. So it's not always transversing. And the problem is that you need to know the methodology on how they collect the data. So for example, in Google Analytics, if you see this green icon usually says that this information is unsampled. So think it about it in the next way. Every particular platform has its physical limitations. So for example, Google Analytics can properly return, again, I'm just making numbers up, but you will understand the logic, can track properly 1,000 of visitors interaction per particular day or particular moment of time. What the system or platform will do if you surpass that threshold or that number of 1,000 users, it will take a sample. And that sample sometimes is not representative at all, sometimes may be misleading, sometimes can be completely useless. So when you see numbers at any given platform, you need to ask two main questions. First question, how much or how really is data reliable? And second question, how can I check that? Because in the cases with Google Analytics and platforms you have control over, occasionally you can see certain properties or the certain definitions on how everything is recorded. And now Ken has brought up a very good question about how much reliable is data from third-party platforms. So question for you guys. Have you heard about Nielsen? Nielsen company. So basically they collect media rankings, basically just the media insights, everything else. Just curious. Okay, I see Eddie heard about them. What about the rest? Okay, I see some responses. Research company, yes, yes. It's Ari, they have so many different divisions, but basically research companies in terms of everything media or online related. So there are companies like Nielsen who, first of all, try to challenge different numbers. So for example, Facebook reports that on average for any given month, automotive companies spend, let's say, $15,000 according to their information. And therefore, they're reaching approximately 3 million people at a given month. Companies like Nielsen, who have the actual data in possession, they can challenge those arguments, saying like, okay, it is impossible for them to reach 3,000 people because they're out of their target audience, they are not in that area, the reliability of those numbers on Facebook's end is a big question mark. So therefore, when we're dealing with the companies like Facebook or large media companies in this case, those numbers have to be challenged. A few years ago, majority of big social media platforms like Facebook, they discontinued support of third-party trackers. So by third-party tracker, I'm talking about the tracker, cookie tracker you were able to set up on the platform. So when the person clicks on your ad and that ad has a particular tracker, you were able to piggyback to attribute that visitor to your media ads on Facebook. So and that information will be stored on a separate platform. So then you will be comparing numbers, which Facebook is reporting on versus the actual numbers. So in this case, Facebook reported that they got 1,000 clicks, but in fact, the number of clicks was, let's say, 800. So therefore, you're seeing that the Facebook is over-reporting the numbers. And trying to answer why they do that, there is no like right or wrong assumption in that case, because first of all, infrastructure of such like giants is a bit messy. So sometimes it is incorrect in the sense it is recording data, but sometimes it's incorrect in the way it is interacting with your pages and tags. So the primary source of truth, and when you're referring to the percentages in terms of deviations, so if you've seen the numbers on Facebook versus numbers in Google Analytics is within 5%, considered acceptable. If it's more than 5 or 10%, so numbers on the actual clicks you've seen or the visitors who came from Facebook on your website versus the number of clicks indicated by Facebook is greater than 5 or 10%, it's a big question mark. But if it's more than 10%, it's a big no-no. So you need to think and you need to check on how, for example, in this case, your Google Analytics is set up. So every case is a very specific, that's why, and unique. That's why there is a significant number of analysts or specialists, like platform specialists, trading or media buyers or media planners who work on that on day-to-day basis, because they are the ones who probably the most up-to-date with the most recent trends. They are willing to answer all those questions on why the numbers on Facebook are lower than on the website, etc., etc., etc. So you need to have those people on board, or if you're willing to learn by yourself, you should be that person. Okay, guys, we are pretty much out of the time, but let's spend 5 minutes just to cover next 2 slides, and then we will have 10 minutes break. So you just need to know how everything is measured and where the difference is coming from. So in order to spot such anomalies, you need to have certain procedures in place. So tracking and measurement systems or tracking and measurement procedures. So you can see that, okay, for this particular campaign, why we are in marketing analytics world, we are using post-mortem campaigns or post-campaign reports to see and to make sure that the numbers we are seeing in the platform, for example, Facebook versus our internal platform or versus our some sort of like a DMP system, makes sense to us. So then we can start asking right questions. Kenneth, does it answer your question?
To a degree, it does.
Okay.
Is there some confidence in services that can validate other metrics? Like, does Nielsen offer validation of Facebook metrics? Is there? I'm just wondering. It's been in the news recently that Facebook was aware that their metrics they were providing were false. I'm just kind of wondering what the response to that has been.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, frankly speaking, the issue is Facebook, and if you saw it first time, like basically recently, that's okay. But I can tell you that over my experience working with media, it's been probably at least last 5 years that once a year or once in 2 years, it is an issue with Facebook and other media platforms. So answering to your question, is there any better ways? And for example, using Nielsen research, there is a number of companies who provide such insights, but those insights, usually they're expensive and they are all being tiled and targeted for the corporate clients, because you need time to collect the data, you need time to slice and dice that information. And for example, if you know the companies like Enronix or the companies who work with, what's the name, with census data, basically the slicing and dicing and structuring information into measurable way in order to validate those numbers versus the platform numbers, it takes time. So usually if you find the company who can do it, it's just a matter of the accuracy of their numbers and their price tag versus the time and effort you are willing to spend to understand their numbers versus the platform numbers. So it all kind of comes to that. Cool. And basically last 2 slides. So basically campaign optimization process, as you guys, I believe, have kind of understood so far, comes to understanding of your data collection and management properties. So basically ad attributes, targeting details, ad performance details, and ad engagement details being available for you at any given moment of time, as well as being able to consolidate your data in the right way. So clean it up, structure it in a certain way, so you can transform that data into reports and to use the data for analytical purposes. Then once you find a certain, not the insight, but let's say you covered a fact that, for example, the number of visitors which are coming from Facebook versus the website is greater than 10%, you coming out with insight with your offer, or okay, maybe it's worth for us to considering using third-party numbers in order to validate our numbers on Facebook, like Nielsen versus Facebook. So you can say that, okay, those numbers are inaccurate, or we were some sort of like advertising tools which can validate the number of cookies or unique visitors IDs from Google Analytics versus Facebook. So then you're getting a healthy sense on how numbers were, first of all, extracted, and secondly, what you do in order to frame it and to format them into something impactful. And then if you have different objectives for your campaigns, whether it is awareness-based campaign, lead gen campaign, or just basically the awareness campaign in terms of like some sort of offline event, you will be using different segments, different KPIs for your different goals. For example, just one example, don't want to hold you for longer than it has to. you want to capture and to generate certain amount of leads. So, for example, you are interested in getting 10 people who sign up for your, let's say, webinar or for some sort of like a demo walking for your real estate property. So you need to hit a certain amount of, let's say, subscribers to your newsletter, or the number of people who downloaded your ebook, in order to capture the number of leads who may be potentially interested in, because you know that at 5% conversion rate, you need to achieve 45 people who sign up for your newsletters and 140 people who downloaded your ebooks because they provided their personal information in exchange. So you can meet your goal of 10 people who will be interested in your services, particularly at 20% conversion rate, for example. And the segments you'll most likely be using in your targeting or in your measurement frameworks or infrastructures would be, for example, segments related to the traffic sources, segments related to the visitor types, or segments related to geographical locations, or basically type of the documents you used for ebooks, PDF versus PPT versus just infographics, just to give you a bit of sense or things to think of. Yeah, it's basically the last slide for this section. Any questions at this point before we go to break? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions coming. So time 3:57. Let's be back at 4:08. So break till 4:08 p.m. Don't be late, guys. Talk to you in 10. All right, guys. Is everyone back? So I can see it. Okay, sweet. So basically, for this topic 11, refresher or key financial and marketing metrics. So I'm not gonna focus on this topic too much. So probably 30 minutes of our time in order for us to spend more time working on the case, because the reason for this topic, it's basically the introduction to the pricing analytics and basically pricing methodologies. Therefore, we will be having very in-depth practice on day 2 and day 3, because in order for us to, first of all, decide whether certain product introduction or the profitability of certain products makes sense, we need to understand and to start with financial and marketing metrics first. So if we right now start calculating those results without the actual numbers, it wouldn't make much sense for us without working those numbers based on the actual cases. Because again, there is a plenty of information on how those numbers can be calculated, different methodologies, etc., etc., etc. There is the expectation that you're coming and already know certain of these metrics already. If you don't, there is a list of resources I included into course outline, as well as by the end of this section. So please take a look if you think that you kind of like require more in-depth introduction or you require more examples. But again, I won't be focusing on this topic too much because we will be having plenty of time talking about the metrics on day 2, day 3, as well as per our conversation for assignment number 2 and assignment number 3. So far, so good. No questions. Okay. So basically, profitability metrics and pricing assessment. These 7 groups of metrics are all about assessing whether the particular project makes sense from the both financial or a business standpoint, as well as from the marketing standpoint. So the reason I decided just to put it, because again, different groups of students, different backgrounds, as well as different exposure to these numbers. So I just want to make sure that we talked about those and you guys get the initial understanding why, for example, break-even analysis is different from EBITDA, as well as when we need to use KGAR and what is the difference between net present value and internal rate on return. Again, it's very self-intuitive and you can learn those metrics on your own, but you will get enough time practicing those on day 2, 3, and for our two assignments, assignment 2 and assignment 3. So overall, if we're talking about assessing profitability of any project introduction, originally we start with break-even analysis, and there is certain methodology in place on how we will be assessing each of those metrics. So why we use break-even analysis? Just the break-even analysis is basically the small point here. Essentially, we're just trying to understand how much, for example, resources we need to sell or how much money we need to make in order to cover all our expenses. So break-even point, it is something that, sorry, it is something that covers our both variable and fixed costs. By fixed costs, we essentially saying that any sort of costs which are fixed in time. So for example, costs which are not associated with your production. So for example, anything you pay as rental fee, anything which you pay as your, for example, contract or some sort of like a partnerships. So where the fee is flat. So it has no adjustments in regards to your volume production. But variable costs, it all about this section. It all about your product numbers. So basically, for example, you spend $1 for packaging one item, one product. So this number, total number of fixed cost, oh sorry, variable costs wouldn't be let's say $100 all the time. It will differ significantly based on your production output. And it also may be flexible in terms of, for example, you spend $1 per first 100 items, $1 for packaging per first 100 items. But once you hit the threshold or you surpass the number of 101 item being packaged, the cost of packaging one item, so 102nd, 103rd, becomes, for example, 75 cents per item. So that's why it is important to understand and to use the right pro formas to calculate both fixed and variable costs. So once you define the point of break even, either in terms of dollars or units, you will understand that, okay, I need to sell this amount of money, oh, sorry, this amount of goods to cover my expenses. But therefore, if I'm expecting the profitability of my investment being 10%, I need also to sell this amount of units in order to achieve that desired number. So therefore, it will generate me a certain amount of revenue. The formula for break even, it's for units, is very simple. Basically, it's fixed cost divided by the difference in selling price versus variable cost. So for example, if we have fixed cost of approximately, I'm talking about like the monetary value, let's say $210,000, but the difference between selling price and variable cost is $600. We are talking 150 units. And again, the similar formula if we're talking about the dollar value. So we are just calculating based on the contribution margin ratio. So very similar, basically the same explanation of the price, but just expressed in a cost way. So you already calculated the net return on one item based on variable cost per one item and per selling price, and then you transfer that into monetary value. So for example, fixed costs, you having $2.1 thousand divided by 60 and times multiplied by 100, you're getting break-even point in sales dollars of $3,500. The ways to calculate the break-even point in units, basically the same about calculation in dollars. Just think about it, or you need to know which units, or sorry, which methodology you will be used. But overall, the methodology is the same. You start with calculating fixed costs, anything which fixed over the time. We will talk about it during our assignments. Then you progress to variable costs. Once you get the sense of variable costs, you calculate the total unit costs, so everything related to the packaging, to the production, manufacturing, etc., etc., etc. Then you're selecting the price to assess. So for example, you're assuming that because of the variable costs, the right price may be $15 per unit. Then you're running the break-even analysis and you're seeing that it's not sufficient price because it doesn't cover your expenses at all, or it's a very hard to achieve number. So automatically you will try to change the price to see whether $15 wasn't sufficient, so maybe I can change it to 17, and then you will assess $17 as your point. And then you will see that, for example, if the break-even point here is achievable within 1 year, because you're expecting to get, let's say, $3 million as a net return over the next 3 years, and you're seeing that you can achieve break-even point within the first year, this project may be positive and be sufficient enough to be introduced, to be basically to be launched. So again, it all comes to investors' expectations and to your risk appetite on how much you can, how much risk you're willing to take. I see some questions. Max and Tonka to cover fixed. Sorry, Max, could you elaborate, please? You mean to explain fixed costs, or you mean to provide more examples? Oh, okay. Yes, it's not the question anymore. Hope so. So another one, it's net present value. So we are basically calculating all our cash flows for any given year by the assumption that we want to understand and to assess the project, let's say, per next 3 or 4 years. So the sums we will be operating will be next. So for example, we have an investment of $2,000, which basically is our expense. And then we're expecting to see the cash flow, incoming cash flow. In the year, let's say, first of, I don't know, let's speak like $500, but the discount rate we're expecting. So our expectation for the first year that we will be able to grow our business and anything associated to it, let's say by 5%. So therefore, this calculation will be assessing the value of our investment per each given year, subtracting the value of the initial investment. And if in the end we're getting the value of all our cash flows divided by time period and sum of time period and discount rate positive, that means that the project is worthy to be launched. But if it's zero or less than zero, it's not worthy of, or it's not worth of starting the project. So just to give you, like, guys, an example. So let's say that we're having a value of basically, 1 second, the investment of $225,000 at the first, basically the first year before the project introduction. But because of the formula or the discount rate is not fixed overall over the time. So why is that? So we are putting that because of the inflation rates. or because of other factors in external economic environment, the value of $1 may be basically decreasing over the time. So we assuming that value of $1 today is $1, but the next year it will be 12% less. And then on the second year or on the third year, it would be 1 plus 12% or minus 10%, basically to the second or to the third degree, because we are taking that into progression that it would be lower value than the year before that. So if we were dealing with, for example, value of $1 on the second or the first year, it was $1 worth. Second year, let's say minus 12%, it would be 88 cents. So on the third year, it would be 12% out of 88 cents. Make sense? So that's why when we're calculating the cash flow, we are assuming the certain amount of return we are getting for particular year, but we are dividing that by the other discount rate or the rate of the value we're expecting to see for all our dollars over the time, because it's either increasing or decreasing, or it may not be stable at all. But again, we need to have a certain base for our hypothesis in order to define and to understand whether it's profitable to launching the project or not. So that's why the net present value has certain limitations, because it depends on the cash flow forecast. We cannot say for sure. We are not sages. We are not foreseers. We don't have a crystal ball to say that in the next 5 years, the value of the dollar or value of this business will be increasing. So it is very straightforward. It's very popular to be used, but we also need to keep in mind that it's not ideal. So we need something else to support our type of the analysis. So this metric alone wouldn't tell us the entire story. So the process for calculating net present value is pretty much similar to assessing the break-even point. So you start with the initial investment, you select the price for assessment, then you're forecasting the number of units you need to sell, and we will talk about that tomorrow. Then you calculating the cash flow for every given year. So for example, based on the production or your forecast, the market demand in year 2 would be 10,000 units. You're able to sell 8,000 units. So you make those calculations for every given year. You're transforming those calculations into monetary value. So 8,000 units times, for example, $30 gives us $24,000 per year. And then you're just calculating NP. Similar example we were talking about here. You're having your discount rate, you're having the cash flow you're expecting to get, and you're getting the present value of the cash flow. And again, present value for this particular moment of time, because for us, what is more important as for marketers, we're interested in having money right now at this moment of time. If it's something that we are talking in the money over the time changes. So the further or the more time we need to spend in order to get this money, to make certain amount of money, it puts us into perspective that the priority or the sense of urgency or the value of those money over the time is lower than it is at the present moment of time. Does it make sense? Is it clear, or some confusion and on that front? Okay, sweet. Thank you, guys. And again, these formulas are not sufficient enough to be used alone. So because this course is about marketing analytics, you guys are studying a whole bunch of different subjects, different courses, like financial analytics, probability, marketing, data analytics, data science, that you are able to get 300% view on your problem. So you are able to basically assess the value of the particular product for your company, as well as to gain the particular, for example, the reason why these metrics can be used interchangeably or sometimes with more exposure or less exposure, it all depends on the problem you're trying to solve or return. Internal rate on return is very similar to net present value, but internal rate of return takes the assumption that we are interested in a discount rate. So basically minimum rate of return the project manager investor is expecting to get. And basically we are expecting our internal rate be the value which will return NPV to 0. So basically it's very similar to the break-even point. But what we are trying to calculate here, we are trying to calculate that, okay, for example, what should be the project's profitability versus discount rate, the expectations, in order for us to make sure that under most negative scenario, our project will still be better. So for example, the expectation of investor is, okay, I'm interested in getting the profit, or I'm assuming that our project in 3 years, when we're calculating net present value, that the value of money will be decreasing, let's say, by 10% or 15%. And you as a manager, understanding that, okay, there are like tons of different factors which may impact the profitability as well as the overall project delivery. So you're calculating the percentage or the discount rate, which would be most realistic in the sense for you to say that, okay, I'm not thinking that, for example, 14 or 16% is the right number, but let me just calculate realistically. If it's 16%, or if it's something better than 16%, or even more, would it be justified enough for us to run this project? And if you have the budget constraints about like, okay, investor is smart person and says like, okay, I'm expecting this project to be 10%, but because of your calculation and everything else, and basically internal rate on return is higher than 10%. So you're seeing that internal rate on return is higher than discount rate, than the expectation. So then, only then you're launching the project. Because if it's something like overarching or very high target, which is impossible to be achieved, that means that the entire forecast and everything you do associated with that will fall apart. So you always need to make sure that the internal rate on return is higher than discount rate. So basically, we are calculating the net present value at which particular project would be value of the particular project will be equal 0. What essentially I'm trying to say, that is in the example, we are taking the discount rate of 12%. We are just calculating everything for for net present value being equal 0. So based on our calculations in Excel, we realize that it is 13.87%, which is higher than 12%. Therefore, it is financial justified or marketing based justified, back justified, that we can launch this project. So far, so good. Okay. Then one of the favorite metrics used, compound annual growth rate, or CAGR. So CAGR, it is the metric which indicates that at which profitability or what is the rate of return you require to grow for every given year. So it is different than the average, just to tell you. So you start with the ending balance and you're defining the beginning balance. So you imagine the next situation. basically probably better to take you guys to the example immediately. Imagine next situation. So you have, let's say, 6 years, and you expect him to get a certain amount of revenue, but you expect him to grow at a certain rate, and let's say it is, for example, 17%. The problem with this methodology, if you take the average annual growth, it will take the values of the most extreme, and so the lowest and the highest value, and take the average of those. What the K-guard does, K-guard basically divides those values in a very distributed way. So those values per year, it would be just the difference or the ratio between the desired value, like the revenue or the top revenue for the last year versus the revenue for the first year, and then it splits it in the equal portions or equal parts over the course of, for example, 6 years. Based on this example, you can see the difference between K-gar and the average functions in Excel. So it's always better to use K-gar, because average annual growth wouldn't necessarily indicate the right result for your efforts, because it is highly impacted by actual, or not the actual, but project extreme values. So in order to eliminate the value of the extremes in your analysis or in your calculations, you're using K-gar. That's the only reason for this calculation to exist. So basically, it's pros or benefits of using this calculation. Easy to evaluate past returns or estimate future profits, but the possible drawback or pitfall, it ignores market volatility and implies that the growth is steady. So again, if you're talking about something in the forecast that you are trying to achieve in, for example, your benchmark or your financial goal for year 1 is growth of 14%, next year 14%, and the further year is 14%, then K-gar. But if you're comparing like something in the past, but you also need to keep in account the market fluctuation, then you take in the actual result for that particular year, and you comparing versus the K-gar. So you can see the fluctuations over the time, because you decided that for the next 5 years, the strategy will be increasing your profits by 10%. But because of the market conditions, fluctuations like this, so you will see that this year we made this amount of money, that year we kind of under delivered by 3% or 4%. So it's a kind of like the whole idea of the K-gar calculation. So basically the K-gar calculation, you need to divide the value of the investment at the end period by the value of its value at the beginning of that period. Raise the result to an exponent of 1 divided by the number of years and subtract 1 from the subsequent result. So essentially, as is given in this formula. Profitability, possible. Investment, possible. Again, it all depends on how well or how accurate your forecast is, as well as your estimate possibly you want to be. So comparing the forecast versus comparing your past results. That's the only purpose of using this formula. Then earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization overview, EBITDA. So basically what we are saying here, that we are interested in seeing the value of our revenues, or basically the value of all our products before calculating taxes, depreciation, amortization. Why do we use that? So first of all, we want to understand what is the percentage ratio of all these components on your earnings overall, or net income. What you can do, so for example, You assuming that your goods are worth of $500. But then when you start breaking that into components, you see that the net income out of $500 is actually $50. So that means the 10%. And you start wondering, okay, so where did I spend the rest of the money? Because of course, for the net income, there is a fixed cost and variable cost, or it is, in other words, operating profitability. But what about interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization costs or expenses? Then it makes you wonder that, for example, I can, and I'm producing high quality goods. They cost, they valued very well. But because of my, I don't know, my manufacturing equipment is obsolete, I pay certain amount for amortization costs as well as for depreciation costs. Or I have some other interests I need to pay as a part of like my credit or my loan. I sign up, let's say 5 years ago in order to get that equipment, etc. So you are calculating EBITDA just optimization purposes, and you can consider it as a partially pricing optimization point, because again, you want to consider the impact on overall financial performance. So it is some sort of like the alternative for simple earnings or net income in some circumstances when you need to optimize certain components or basically the whole equation overall. So EBITDA can be misleading because it strips out the cost of capital investments like property, plant, and equipment. You are just dealing with the end result of net income, which net income partially is reflecting, but if it all depends on the formula you decided to use for this particular calculation. So just be careful with calculating EBITDA and calculating net income, because you need to have a very clear understanding on the components used for both EBITDA, net income, interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization costs. So the best way of doing this is always using pro formas or calculation formulas like this. So you either create some sort of like an income statement in your Excel spreadsheet, whether you have all those sections listed one by one. So then you can use like a different color formatting features or options. So you can see that whether this particular item or like line of your expenses is positive or negative. So for example, in this case, everything in red is expense, everything in basically plain black would be considered as a gain for your business. So at the end of the result, you're formatting that, for example, all your main sections of your analysis, like net income, operating profit, and gross profit, will be highlighted in boldface. So at the end of the day, you will be able to easily locate the desired part of your analysis, as well as to understand, or you can put just like a percentage value on the right here. So you can get the entire schema on, for example, the revenue is such percentage of my net income, or net income and EBITDA is this percentage of my overall revenue. Make sense, guys? Again, in theory, it is simple, but the biggest challenge you will be having over the time, because again, you all coming from different backgrounds. So some of you had exposure before or prior exposure, some of you haven't, but you will need to sit, spend some time doing this by yourself, dirty hands, because again, I can teach you the theory, I can give you rationals, but before you guys start doing this by yourself, it wouldn't have much value. So that's the reason I'm giving you like the top overview. So you will have, okay, the idea, aha moment, and then you'll start calculating that and you will be able to estimate those results. Customer lifetime value. So the trick about customer lifetime value, there are basically numbers of ways on how to define and to analyze customer lifetime value. So think about this one. If you have well-oiled machine, my favorite phrase, sorry. Well-oiled machine in terms of attribution of your acquisition costs, returns, and the analysis of average order value. No reason to worry. You can calculate everything easily. But the challenge is hidden in detail. World is not perfect, and most likely that our data is messy. So you can calculate customer lifetime value using just rough calculations like Excel or a piece of paper, just basically writing some notes using calculator or anything else. But because we are living in not perfect world, as well as our data is messy, that's why we're using the prediction, we're building predictions or forecast using Python or R. So when your data is messy and it is structured in a certain way, but each segment, each value requires different treatment, then you use then you analyze and forecast customer lifetime value using software like Python and R. In all other cases, when you are able to clearly attribute all those results, or you're just taking the averages, which still works, you're using just raw calculations by hand calculations. So customer lifetime value is basically considers all number of average returns per transaction per month, year, or whatever the period is. Again, I just took this this picture because it clearly defines different colors, so I really like it. Then you multiply the average number of transaction per average order value, multiplies by the gross margin you're expecting to get from the average transaction, because again, those are averages. And you know that an estimate, each customer remains with your company for example, 24 months. So if you know that the number, because you have high velocity business, is let's say one transaction in a month worth $20, and you're expecting to get 1.5 margin, and customer is likely to stay with you for 24 months, well, you just have one segment, let's say. So you calculate this number and you divide the number of clients for that particular segment for that particular period. So then you're getting the customer lifetime value for the particular segment. And what can you do with that value? That's simple. You just need to know the acquisition cost for a particular segment, because they, again, likely to be approached in a certain way, require certain support from customer support or customer rep team. So you are willing to calculate that, okay, the cost, acquisition cost, $80, customer lifetime value, $100. $20 make perfect sense for your business as difference between acquisition and revenues perspective. And in order to retain that group of customers or that customer for another 2 years, let's say, you just need to spend extra dollars and you will get $80 again, which is good investment. So majority of marketing efforts coming from, again, we're just summarizing everything we learned so far. From, first of all, customer journey, customer problem identification, then transitioning that customer journey and problem identification into segmentation analysis, coming up with our desired financial outcomes, our pro formas, in the way we just discussed for the previous 5 groups of metrics: EBITDA, net present value, internal rate on return, in order for us to say that, okay, if we spend this amount of money for this particular group, we will get this amount of return for this group. So then it will raise another question: how can we adjust our existing communications? So we're going into another loop: acquisition, enabling or basically engaging the group of visitors to convert, they're converting, and then repeat the sale. So you're getting this kind of loop. And then if everything works well and your returns are well justified based on your acquisition cost, you're good to go. Company is set to success. So then customer lifetime value process, or the way how to calculate the process. You will basically starting with the calculation of all previous items per or previous variables per this formula. The definitions are given as such. Again, I won't dive too deep into that because we will have small exercise tomorrow, so you will guys get a chance to see it. But overall, it's very self-intuitive. And when we are talking about like the actual formulas, not a set of definitions, they're all here. Churn rate is so there are two rates you just need to consider: retention rate, so percentage of the customers who is likely to retain with your business, and the churn rate, the percentage of customers who most likely terminate the relationship with your company. And just like some small idea on how you can categorize or to calculate customer lifetime value for 3 different segments. For example, John Cappuccino, Susan Latte, and Stacy Espresso. So you're owner of, for example, coffee shop. You define that there are 3 groups of people who drink 3 different types of coffee, which affect in your profitability. So you just calculate that, okay, there is the amount of average sale, average number of repeat sales for a given time period, average cost of goods sold per type of coffee, per relationship with the client, expected retention time for each of those group of customers. So the total sales per cycle, and then you're just calculating the profitability margin in the percentage value. And then you're calculating that, okay, Stacy Espresso is probably the cheapest because, for example, there are not many people who make repeat purchases, so they are not frequent drinkers, as well as the number of people who being identified as John Cappuccino type of customers. Also, not very high number of repeated sales. So it's better to stick with Susan Latte because profitability for this group of customers is the highest, as well as the number of repeat sales, which is the key to your business, is the highest for sales on average versus 1 and, for example, 0.25%. So it's very tiny fraction. So therefore, you're most likely to entail your value proposition for this group, either in order to encourage them to buy coffee more, or you may want to think about how to optimize Stacy Espresso group because you see the profit margin is the highest in order for them to increase the average number of repeated sales per this segment. So again, several different things to consider because at the end of the day, the biggest deal or the biggest business we are trying to achieve is to compare scenario 1, 2, and 3. And that would be your assignment number 3, Colgate precision case. So you will be estimating the different scenarios and then calculating the different scenarios outcomes in order to select the right positioning strategy. Because here, essentially, again, if you think about the segmentation, you have the segment, you have the financial forma built in, you calculated all the values. Now, what you need to decide, the positioning strategy, what comes next, what kind of the price you will be offering, and what you're gonna sell based on the external information, either from, let's say, industry research papers, white papers, or based on your customer segmentation analysis based on poll information or survey data. So then you can improve your profitability as well as to please and to meet the customer's demand better. And the favorite one, I believe you all heard about return on investment, ROI. So ROI has a number of variations: return on marketing investment or on marketing spend, MROI, as well as return on ad spend, ROIs. So the difference between those is simple. ROI is mainly used for large investment decision. So new product introduction, investment, what else I can think of? Basically stock investments, etc. So then you calculate in return on investment. If investment, you are talking about something like marketing campaign, the cost of designing piece of collateral materials, printed materials, exhibitions, so everything which comes into equation. When you calculating the return on ad spend, you have Facebook ads, you spend $200 promoting your services, for example. So services here will exist separately from your ad costs, your ad budgets. So you're calculating return on ad budgets or ad spend in terms of how many of people who engaged or took the action or somehow interacted with your ads were converted into sales. And these results, these three metrics, will be all different based on case. But I can tell you right away that for our work moving forward, we will be mostly dealing with return on investment. And return on investment in that case will be somehow similar to return on marketing investment. But return on marketing investment, and please keep that in mind, it is something which is related to tactical execution, campaign related. Return on investment as a large item would also be related, will be only related to something like equipment, new equipment purchases, product line optimizations, stores openings, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, you may consider that as a marketing investment, but it kind of like goes to the finance people decision on how everything will be categorized, labeled, and how everything will be analyzed from the financial standpoint. So don't focus on that too much. Don't scratch your head and think, oh, Jesus, how I will pick the right metric. It's not the point here. The point here is to give you a sense that there are three different metrics which exist or coexist, but the one you will be mostly dealing with is return on investment. And this return on investment will be justifying your positioning as well as your product introduction in the long term. So the formula for return on investment is simple. You take in the total revenue, subtracting the total cost, dividing by total cost, and multiplying by 100% because it's a percentage. ROI is always percentage. So basically, ROI, in other words, is just the matter of efficiency you're getting to get for your project over the time. And basically, that's it. So we had, or we will be having 7 metrics to calculate. I see the question. Matching time horizons for cost and for revenue is important for this calculation. What are time horizons for branding type activities? Well, there is no right or wrong answer and no definite answer I can give you for that one, because branding would be considered as something that which is ongoing. So it's kind of like earned share or earned coverage. So I would anticipate something like annual. So it all starts probably with the annual budget, and then it all breaks into quarterly budgets for supporting branding activities. So most likely that it will be up to company to decide how they will spend or how they will break those costs. Other industry rules, rules of thumb. A good question. Let me just think for a moment. I don't think, Kenneth, frankly speaking, I don't think that there are any like industry rules. I would say it all based on your business model you're running. So for example, you have the list of competitors who run certain business activities in a given moment of the year. So technically it is the matter of predicting your competitors' activities for every given year, at the same time making sure that you're not losing share of voice or the exposure to your audience for every given year. So for example, you're getting the competitor who gets who introduces new product in Q3 2020, but you want to make sure that your budgets in terms of advertising or basically just brand advertising, like for example Bonaqua, it's always on, so you willing to spend 20, let's say 5% of the whole audience because you're advertising on TV for every given month for this year. So you're not willing to spend more, but you're not willing to spend less. So it is always on and it's always present. So in terms of rules of thumb, not quite sure, to be honest. I guess it's more up to the company, business model, and the competitors' activity on the market. Any other questions? No, we good? Okay, so I also uploaded several articles. One moment, just trying to think. Extend session. So it all under articles folder on in Moodle. So you guys, 1 second, can go and check them by yourself. What I encourage you to do, if you want to get, or if you don't have like a prior exposure to all these metrics, there are two good articles. 1 second, just trying to log in. So article number 1, I would say it's a must read, would be basic quantitative analysis for marketing. And then I also recommend you to read customer intimacy and other value disciplines, because it will give you the sense of what kind of metrics you may or you better be analyzing for as a part of your marketing activities. And then 4 steps to forecast total market demand. Again, I'm not writing it down. You guys need to know this by heart, that this is graduate school, and it's not about the knowledge, it's about your ability to manipulate the information. So 4 steps to forecast total market demand, it's all about improving or basically extending your mindset in terms of how you can articulate the information. So also recommend you to read that, because 4 steps to forecast total market demand will be very, very useful for assignment number 3, Colgate Precision Toothbrush. So this is the list of articles I recommend you to use. Refresher on net present value, I believe, is not available in Moodle, but you can look it up on Harvard Business Review, as well as any books or chapters from the books recommended on the recommended reading list from the course outline. So that should give you, first of all, a good grip on everything you need to know, as well as how to compare all the results metrics when it's too complex, but at the same time, not letting you lose your mind on deciding which position strategy or which scenario for your particular product is the best. So you can perform in a very similar way. So far, so good. Any questions at this point? Okay, sweet. So if there are no questions, we have approximately 30 minutes left. No, not 30, 20 minutes left. So for the next hour, we will be not for the next hour, for the next probably couple of hours. We will be focusing on, yeah, oh, okay, sweet. We do have some time. We will be focusing on measuring ROI on sports search ads business case. So this business case, I was aiming to completely finish today. If again, we don't get much time to finish it, we will be able to finish it at home, similarly to what we did with the customer journey maps exercise. So what I want to ask you guys to do right now, so go to the folder in class materials and go to the folder number 4. There are 2 files. measuring ROI on sponsored search ads, the actual case, and the actual student spreadsheet. So for the next 20 hours, 20 minutes, I would like you to read the case and open the student spreadsheet and start thinking of about the numbers which are available there. So basically, if you break it into action items. So first of all, for the next 20 minutes, read the case, get familiarized with the associated Excel file for this case, and start calculating the total traffic averages for two periods, week 1 till 10 and week 12 till 12 for Google search ads first. Make sense? So I'm just including the timeline until what's the time? 5:21 p.m. Items number 1 and 2, and then we'll pick it up and continue with item number 3. I will be here if you guys have any questions or anything related to this case or to our course overall. Feel free to ask. I will be able to answer, as well as I will be just opening some files on my machine so we can go through this case within the next 40 minutes together. Cool. Guys, so far so good. Any questions, any issues with the calculations? Just give me thumb up so I can see it, please. Okay, sweet. Yeah, thank you. So let's take 10 minutes break, because I know that basically for this lecture, it's right at time. So then once we return, we will discuss a bit of the background, the challenges, and then we'll proceed with the calculations, okay? So break time till 5:30 p.m. Yeah, see you guys in 10. All right, guys, back to work. So everyone's here. Just thumb up so I can see it. Okay, guys, I see you. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, okay, sweet. So, okay, guys, please unmute yourself. Let's have a bit of discussion. Just kind of like to summarize the things, summarize the thoughts you or ideas you got while doing this, while reading this article, because first of all, it is in fact a real case, real life scenario which some of you may have dealt with, some of you may be dealing with, and some of you will be or would be dealing with. So just kind of like trying to see your perspective on the situation. So anyone, please step in, unmute yourself. Glad to hear your opinions, thoughts, and the source of the problem from your perspective. Guys, it's a graduate school. I'm not gonna be picking people, or I may try, but you may not like it. So anyone, Kenneth, so the question is your thoughts, what's the problem of this case, and what kind of initial thoughts you got while reading this case?
Basically the idea that an accidental experiment in effectiveness of Google advertising came up. So it's pretty obviously a good idea to compare the change in clicks and see whether that's in kind of the natural variance of what it would be, and with an extra benefit of having the Bing to do a kind of seasonality adjustment of numbers. If you just by looking at the two things, you see that there's some decrease for Bing numbers for the weeks that there's no Google numbers. So it gives you some kind of capability to do some adjustments.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so basically, yeah, Kenneth, thank you for summarizing. It is basically the whole purpose of the case. So basically, what we're dealing with is just the perception of the people in regards to, first of all, the numbers or the outcomes they initially getting in terms of like the initial feedback or response. So, for example, for me, the big red flag was the ROI of 300%, which essentially 320%, which is for me seems to be very high. And the basic assumption and what I tried you guys to ask to do while basically summarizing and identifying the averages for the first two periods for Google between weeks 1 to 9 and 10 to 12, just to see the average number spikes for all the trafficking. So 1 second, just trying to drag this spreadsheet to the screen. So if you're talking about like the averages for sponsored traffic for Google only, because we were able to clearly track traffic for first 9 weeks for sponsored ads. We are most likely dealing with the average number of 31.3 thousand clicks for any given week. But when we are talking about organic, this number, of course, is higher. So that number would be approximately 125,000 clicks per each given week for organic on Google. But when we are comparing the numbers for week, taking the averages for organic traffic for Google for week 10 and 12, we are seeing that the average number is approximately 148.4 thousand clicks, which makes us wonder if there are any sort of the difference in the way the Bob is assuming those numbers, first of all, originating, and secondly, the attribution of sponsored clicks to organic clicks. Is it the accurate to assume, or is it not? Is it inaccurate completely to assume? Because what we are seeing that during the first 9 weeks, the organic traffic was in fact lower than after presumable allocation of the sponsored results to organic results for weeks 10 till 12. Make sense?
Yeah, there's pretty good looking evidence for some cannibalism of organic
Exactly.
by paid.
Thank you, Kenneth. So basically, in terms of like cannibalization and anything attribution related, we need to consider two things at the same time. So first of all, based on the actual case description, you guys can see, 1 second, next graph. 1 moment, just dragging it to my screen. So the difference between organic and and sponsored ads or paid search ads results. Because of organic results allocated right beneath the sponsored ad results, essentially the points presented in the case indicate that when we are running sponsored ad results simultaneously with organic ads results, sponsored ads may cannibalize the share of organic results. Cannibalization in this sense means that sponsored ads, if they're running simultaneously with organic results, they're taking the share from organic results when we are just running organic results. So just to put it into perspective, we are having, let's say, on any normal week, approximately 100 organic clicks if you're not running any sponsored ads. However, when we are running sponsored ads, we are seeing the decline in organic click results to, for example, 70. So 70 results for organic clicks. And all of a sudden, we are getting 50 clicks for sponsored ad results. Why that? Why it might be an issue? Well, it's simple. So sponsored ads may take the share, so the cannibalization share or cannibalization rate of approximately 30% from organic clicks, And then what they also do, because sponsor ads also running for different search queries, so we can consider that as a branding search queries and non-branded search queries. But some queries may not necessarily return results organically. So for example, if you're Googling, like, let's say, best women shoes, for example, in Kiev, sometimes it may return organic results, but sometimes it may not. So in order to capture that pool of search queries effectively, you need to run sponsor ads. And those sponsor ads may be targeting branded terms like bazaar shoes, or may not be running bazaar related search queries like best shoes in Kiev, but not having the indication of the store, which is bazaar in this case. So understanding the idea behind the cannibalization is crucial, because again, it will be something that we will be talking in detail tomorrow and day after tomorrow, as well as it would be the case for our assignment number 3. But overall, when we look at the results and the number of ROI Bob was referring to of 320% as an ROI result, it is a big red flag for us that it may be something going on incorrectly. My question for you here, remember our lecture on attribution modeling? So post click, post or last click, first impression, last impression, basically, what kind of attribution do you think was used for this particular case? First click or last click. Yeah, exactly. Any other ideas? Max, can you explain why you think it was first or last click? In this case, let's refer to this example as a last click. So the last click person made by clicking on the search ad.
Sorry, can you again repeat the question? Actually, I didn't catch. Why?
Yes, sure. Why do you think it is last click attribution used in this particular case?
The simply the client see the advertisement and make a click. I don't know. Is my point of view.
So basically, just to unwrap it, you are considering as the attribution of the conversion results, the best possible way to attribute those results would be based on the last click attribution model for search ads, correct?
I guess so.
Okay, thank you. Any other ideas about the attribution models? Come on, people.
Isn't that just kind of definitional? So like what Google Ads gives you, that's the information they give you? It's like
Basically,
last click info?
basically, for if you go to Google, one second, Google Analytics and to Google Ads, so because Google Ads environment is slightly different, but here, one second, I believe we will be able to access this information. So basically, we can play around with attribution settings and just to see the value of any of the given clicks. So if you go basically to the attribution, as I was showing you last week, so you may see one type of the results here by default, but when you go and start comparing the results in Google Analytics for Google Ads campaign versus the results per attribution, those results may be different. So the whole point is that for this assignment, it's particularly the last click attribution being used, that's correct. But essentially, I always want you guys to pay attention to other possible alternatives, because we want to make sure that, first of all, this information is being considered, and secondly, when we are seeing that the numbers first of all, the differences in numbers between our reported conversions in, for example, Google Analytics versus Google Ads. We clearly want to make sure that we know the origin of that difference, as well as differences between any other platforms. So for example, reported conversions in Google Analytics, hundreds, reported conversion in Facebook Ad Manager, 120. So 20% difference, which is really significant. So just some things to think about moving forward, because again, it is very important for us to understand that we are effectively capturing such differences. So far, so good? Okay. So just trying to open this one. So for now, could you guys please focus next 5 minutes working on step 3 and step 4? So we basically want just to summarize the click volumes for both Google and Bing by week and by platform. So then we will be able to compare results. And then if there are any volunteers, just to take us through their numbers, because I have those numbers on my computer. I mean, it's not really interesting to show you guys my numbers. I just wanted to see what you guys and how you guys are making those calculations. So for the next 10 minutes, number 3 and 4. Yes, guys, and just in case, I'm just gonna add a side note, compare both total and average traffic volumes per week periods. So the total traffic for week 1, total traffic for week 2, total traffic for week 3, for both paid and organic. And take averages for just for channel and for the week. So for example, average traffic for organic traffic for week 1 till 9 was this number. Average traffic for week 1 to 9 for paid traffic was this number. Max, please don't forget when you're typing, send your question to everyone in the channel so everyone can see it. Okay, guys. So how many of you were able to calculate the average traffic volumes for both Bing and Google for 2 separate time periods, week 1 till 9 and week 10 to 12? Yeah, just a thumb up so I can see it. Okay, so what do you see? What's the trend you're observing? Either the traffic going upwards or downwards, increasing or decreasing? I'm talking about week 10 period of 10-12 versus week period of 1 till 9. Decreasing. Okay, I start seeing some answers. Please type it in on unmute your mic so I can hear you and we all can hear you. Anyone else?
Hi, Kenneth.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Bing, which is because there was no glitch, is kind of the control. There was around a 3% decrease in 3.5% in between week 1 and 9 and week 10 and 12. In total organic paid, it's all in the kind of the neighborhood of 3.5%. And then in Google, there was a decrease in the total of around 5%, but for average organic, an increase of 18% or so.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Any other results than Kenneth? Anyone, just type it in or unmute your mic, please. Okay, sweet. So essentially, I believe you guys got something like this. 1 second, just hiding irrelevant section to you at this point. So basically, the traffic, and I believe all of you should have the same result. So the traffic decrease for week 10 till 12 it would be, we are talking about the averages, minus 5% for Google and minus 3.5% for Bing. So Kenneth's numbers as well as Max, Igor's numbers are accurate as well. So I'm hoping that everyone got the same numbers. But here's the thing. We also need to calculate, first of all, to understand Bob logics in terms of the way he perceived the calculations, as well as to calculate correct results. So Bob's calculation most likely to be incorrect at this point, as many of you have guessed already, because the ROI or ROS in this case, better to say, but we can use them interchangeably, of a positive 320%, it's overinflated. So what I want you guys to do, I'm just gonna leave this section 1 second just to scroll a bit. So not actually showing the numbers. So I'm leaving all these sets of metrics, or basically the way you can approach this particular question. So you can make calculations on your end separately. It's hidden from you on my screen. So please replicate it on your machines, calculate those results. We are particularly interested in the actual ROI versus projected ROI in Bob's calculations. And we will be comparing them, I believe, in, I guess 10 minutes should be enough. If not, we will let's have a conversation in next 15 minutes. So 2 things. First of all, recreate the calculation or the revenue Bob has in his calculations, and secondly, calculate the right numbers. So discussion in 15 minutes. Item number 5. Cool. Makes sense. Any questions about this task? Kenneth, thank you. Everyone else? Just to make sure, guys, that we're on the same page. Cool. So you should be able to clearly read this section so you can recreate it on your end. Because again, don't want to hide too much things from you as of now, but at the same time, I don't want you guys to spend a lot of time just figuring out how to approach and structure everything. So our targeted time is 6:15, and then we will discuss the differences in ROI. Our actuals versus Bob's calculations. And again, if there are any questions, let me know, please. All right, guys, I'm moving the spreadsheet to my screen on the left. So you get a chance, first of all, to present your findings as well as to talk about your numbers you got. So anyone, please step in or type it in the chat. So first of all, the number I'm interested in, the actual ROI on the ad spend you got versus the ROI on ad spend which Bob was referring to. So your results, please. And Max, but overall the result for both Bing and Google, do you have some? Like the aggregated. Anyone else? I see. 10% and negative 30%. Okay. And Bob has 320%. Okay. What about the rest? Yeah, we do have. Basically, I was providing you the piece of the spreadsheet so you can guys calculate on your own, just not instead of kind of like going back and forth in terms of putting all numbers together. But you can, you have all information. Another 5 minutes so you guys can finish. Or you want me to present my spreadsheet? Again, it's just learning for you guys, not for myself. I calculated those numbers already once. Okay, Igor, so your response, thank you. Come on, people. Let's be more engaging, please, so I can see what's going on there. Okay. Okay, guys, so I'm moving my spreadsheet to the screen so you can see it. So first of all, we have some basic assumptions, and the table I'm referring to, sorry, the part of my spreadsheet is here. Can you guys, first of all, see it properly? So all characters and numbers are visible. Thumb up, or I can zoom it in. Okay. So because we were operating under assumptions of Bob's calculation, as well as the basic information was given to us already. So we had information on the cost per click, as well as conversion rate after arriving to the website, 12%, average margin per conversion of $21, and margin from a customer upon his or her arrival to the website, $2.52. So the way we calculated everything per Bob's example was basically all the, one second, just trying to scroll to the left, all the sponsored traffic for Google. So basically for the week 1 till 9. So again, it's just in my example, and the way you maybe calculate it was different. So that's the reason I just wanted to have a brief chat about it. So we have the average traffic in Bob's calculation, and we have the average percentage of the traffic through ads. So basically the sum of all traffic for both sponsored and organic ads, and that sum was divided by weeks. So the way the total average traffic for the weekly average, and then the total weekly average traffic for, oops, was taken as a percentage. So the percentage of the traffic through ads was 20%, which is okay. We can take it, but not really relevant or really accurate. So the spend on the ad was accurate. So the cost per click was 60 cents. The revenue from the ad was $2.52. And then when they're calculating ROI, the results are 320%. However, when we are calculating like difference calculations between, for example, the number, one second, of like the potential loss or the potential reduction in the traffic we were seeing for week 10 till 12, it was -5%. So basically the average traffic we kind of were considering of attributing was 5.18% times the value for the traffic for Google for week 1 till 9, 156.5 thousand clicks. And then the spend on the ads, the way we calculated it, that is, or the based on the actual calculations. So it was the weekly average traffic through ads times cost per click, and then revenue from additional traffic due to ads. So basically margin from the customer times weekly average traffic was 20.4 thousand, and the ROI on spend was 8%. But that is unfortunately incorrect, because the right calculation when we are talking about the numbers overall, so first of all, it all comes to attribution. So when we're referring to attribution, and again, this is kind of the overall performance for both Google and Bing. So that's why I was asking what was the cumulative. We are talking about normalized reduction in traffic too. So that was kind of like the difference we are expecting to see. So basically the average percentage in terms of D24 value minus D25 traffic from Google and Bing, because some of you, and I believe Kenneth was mentioning that to that originally, that we sometimes need to see the directional trend. So whether the traffic is increasing or decreasing in order to see the right pattern. So the reason, for example, one reason why our traffic was decreasing for both Bing and Google, that was the introduction of new competitors on the market. Therefore, the bidding became more troublesome, or maybe the changes in ad spend. Oh, I see some questions. He assumed 100%, not 20%. That's correct. And also the basic assumptions that Bob was operating weren't correct. So basically that was a part of the issue, how these calculations went sideways. So then when we are switched from the sponsor ads to organic, we're assuming that this basically average traffic attributable to ads for the week 1 and 9 to Google, for Google, was basically just 1.62%. So it was very low. Instead of being 1 second, instead of being 31,000, so it is really low. And then when we are comparing to basically overall the numbers based on Bob's calculations versus our calculations, it is basically 28,000. It's an accurate number. That number was taken basically just to show you like the progression and the naming. So the actual spend on the ads would be identified based on the total weekly average traffic through ads, and Bob identified it correctly. But the revenue though would be different, because revenue would be considered based on the weekly average traffic, so which is 2.5 thousand clicks rather than 1 second. Revenue spend, rather than just attributing all the traffic and all the spend in the percentage ratio. So attributing all 100% of all clicks to overall ROI. So he attributed that basically ROI was driven 100% by all the trafficking, but it's incorrect, because for this case, we are just measuring paid as separate object from organic, because we can only attribute our results for the paid channel. So then the percentage will be lower, and therefore the percentage of the actual ROI is negative, because we identified that the revenue for the traffic is $6.4 thousand. The actual spend, which basically Bob was referring to, sorry, not Bob, but in the difference calculation based on Bob's assumptions, was 18.8 thousand. That's correct. But when we are calculating the actual ROI would be negative for paid ads only. But if we can say something about like overall for both Google and Bing, that would be slightly different calculation. I see some questions. 1 second. Do we pay for Google 10 to 12 weeks? So basically, if we look at the actual calculations here, so basically you see the weekly average traffic attributed to ads, we were taking into consideration the amount of week 1 to 9. And the reason being that we weren't able to clearly define the traffic for weeks 10, 11, and 12 because of the glitch in the system. So again, the right way of doing this, again, according to the book, is basically just following whatever the available numbers are at our disposal. So this would be this kind of progression. So once you have the definite numbers and you're not operating under assumptions, you are objective. When you're operating under assumptions that, okay, we can take the chunk of these numbers and then add chunk from there, that would be subjective judgment. So basically what I encourage you guys to do, or I do it at my work. I have two results. One result based on the objective findings. So for example, there was a glitch on week 10, 11, 12. I cannot say for sure, or I can say with certain certainty that, for example, this amount of revenue can be, or may be, better to say, may be attributed to that with particular certainty. But if you're talking about just a very hard, very precise number, that would be the number for first 9 weeks. So the number based on the average or weekly total traffic for Google. Make sense? So again, there is no right or wrong answer, because the way this kind of like calculation was put, and again, you guys have to spend some time going back and forth in your calculation. So no worries if your calculations is different, because again, we all have different assumptions and different rationales. But overall, does it make sense? And are there any questions?
Can you go through your correct version of the spend on ads, how you calculated that?
Sure. So basically, spend on ads, it all was based on the weekly average traffic through ads, which Bob defined correctly. I'm talking about the averages. So if you look at the average, it all averages traffic for the first 9 weeks for sponsored ads for Google only. And then the assumption of the cost per click was already given, 60 cents per click. So when we were calculating the spend on ads, we were taking the weekly average traffic through ads and calculating per cost per click. And the revenue was calculated based on, one second, the weekly average traffic attributed to ads weekly. So we have the same granularities weekly, and the margin from the customer arrival to the website of $2.52. Therefore, we just basically subtracted these numbers and divided by spend on ads in order to get the desired number. Any other questions?
So our assumption is that we are spending 18,000 for Google, and
yep.
And what we are gaining is only 2,500 extra traffic. Yeah. So all others could reach us via organic. Yeah. So we are trying to attribute all our spendings to the small amount of traffic that we are assuming that it's lost due to absence of a Google advertising. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. We are just working with the numbers which we are comfortable with and we are 100% certain with. That's the only one. So everything which came through all traffic, which technically or originally supposed to be paid for weeks 10, 11, and 12, we are not considering into this equation. We are considering only the numbers we have 100% confidence in order us to justify the spend on the traffic. Because again, remember when I was saying that it all comes to justification on attribution model we use. Campaign optimization, especially for search ad related optimizations, it is the best way to use for last click models, because it would be the only, probably the best indicative way of our performance. I see some questions, one second. We are also assuming advertising responding traffic has same spending conversion numbers to organic traffic. And yes and no, because basically, if we are considering spend here for organic traffic, well, it's a bit tricky to justify that SEO efforts or blog efforts or anything content related is equal to, has, first of all, cost per click value as our paid ads. And secondly, those values are comparable. So Organic traffic, I wouldn't take into equation when we are measuring the efforts of the paid media campaign. May we see formula for 162% of traffic attributed to ads? 1 second. Yep. So basically, the difference between basically I can take you through it. So the difference between the traffic for 1 second, Bing versus Google, it's just the reduction. So we are trying to justify or basically seeing the reduction in the traffic upwards or downwards. Sorry, to be clear, I meant visitor purchase conversion, not our spend. 1 second. Yeah, Kenneth, in that case, yeah, we can assume that the percentage or like the conversion rates would be similar. Yeah. Max, so answering your question, basically reduction in traffic. Difference between weeks 10, 12 for Google platform versus Bing platform. So again, it is something for us just to see a directional analysis. So where we're going upwards or downwards, so that the number can be returned for us in a certain certainty. Any other questions? Because there are some other things I want to cover for our work tomorrow. So if there are any questions regarding this case, please ask them now. Otherwise, we'll be transferring to slightly different things just to make sure that you guys have the right setup for tomorrow. Thumb up if there are no questions, so I can see it, please. Okay, sweet. So just to kind of like to recap this case, again, guys, I want you to have very clear view on what is important to be measured. So when we're measuring paid campaign, we are measuring paid campaign only, and we are taking assumptions of paid traffic only, because paid traffic, it is measurable in the way we invest this amount of money and we're expecting or we're gaining this amount of money. In this case, there was also a very interesting example, 1 second, of using called natural experiment. 1 second, I'm just trying to quickly find it so I can explain it better. So natural experiment, in fact, it's not the natural experiment, it's a field experiment. Natural experiment, that is something we are considering regardless of the circumstances. So let's say that naturally versus observed empirically or therefore simulated. So in this case, we were in fact not naturally experimenting, we were field experimenting, we were experimenting as with our assumptions. So direction for the traffic for weeks 10, 11, and 12 for Google platform probably would be progressing in the same direction as the traffic for Bing. So in terms of using definitions in the case or in day-to-day life, I encourage you guys to be very careful because, again, different backgrounds. Some people came from scientific backgrounds, some people came from economical backgrounds. And the meaning of particular words, especially natural experiment, field experiment, or field observations, etc., 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 may be different. So in order to make sure that we speak the same language, not in terms of like English, Ukrainian, or whatever language we're choosing, same definitions are being used across all our communications. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, is I'm trying to kind of like explain, consider this like all channel optimization is a part of a bigger puzzle. So as far as you are able to work with objective facts and subjective truth, you should be fine. Objective truth in everything which we have 100% certainty in. Paid search performance, money invested in paid search, money achieved from the paid search. When we are talking about organic, for this particular case and for any cases moving forward, we won't be able to clearly say that we invested X amount of money in organic search, because first of all, it's hard to justify, and I can basically explain it to you in many different ways, and no one will be able to convince me that we can get a very clear amount up to 1 cent without financial information. And secondly, we are just justifying or measuring anything that can be measured. Are we clear on that? Definitions, everything else. It will be important for all our assignments. Thumb up so I can see it. Okay, thank you guys. So then we have approximately 15 minutes left. Yeah, even less. So first thing first, how many of you got a chance to, or had a chance to work before with data analysis and solver add-ins in Excel? Just plus sign or thumb up so I can see it. If you haven't worked, just put minus, because it is important. I just need to think how to adjust all the material for our conversations tomorrow. So it will be really helpful if I can see some responses. Okay. So it's roughly like 50-50 split. Okay. Okay. So then, guys, what I want you to do. So first of all, for anything pricing modeling related, we will be using solver and a bit of data analysis. For our assignment number 2, you may want to use data analysis add-in, and I will explain it. Again, it's not the rocket science, it's very straightforward, and I will make sure that you guys have all the instructions on how to use those, or at least I will share something with you. But please make sure that all these add-ins are installed before our lectures tomorrow, because the way that our lectures will be structured, in fact, we will be having 2 main topics or 2 main lectures: retail and pricing analytics, and forecasting and benchmarking, kind of like tips and the overview of this section. So we will be heavily focusing on the Excel. So the third topic for our conversation or for our lecture tomorrow in class practice, it all will be kind of like switching back and forth from the theoretical materials to practical materials. So for example, we will discover, for example, let's say price skimming technique for pricing analytics or for pricing modeling. But then we will be practicing that price skimming technique in Excel simultaneously. Still quite not confident how much time we would need to spend for that one. So I'm still kind of like debating myself whether I'm going to provide some homework or not, but price skimming, yeah, not like skimming as SKIMMING, skimming. Yep. So that would be the part of our work tomorrow. So let me think today, and again, if you guys see any presentations as of today, they are not available for our lectures tomorrow, because still I have like a really hard time to estimating how much time we would need to kind of like run these exercises smoothly, kind of like going back and forth. So everything should be on Moodle before will be on Moodle before our lecture tomorrow. Please just make sure that you have data analysis and solver installed on your machines, because I will try, first of all, to take you through the theoretical part as well as to showing how it can be done on your machines. But then I'm thinking about including some components that you guys will be able to play around with, for example, the mini task, calculating and making sure that the numbers are reflected or possible to be computed on your machines. So then we will be able to some sort of compare results on my machine versus your machine, or results I have in mind in terms of the way I estimated versus your numbers. Are you fine with that format, or you just want me to take you through it as kind of like the lecture and you won't be making any calculations on your end. Option one, I'm showing you calculations, all materials, and then you do it on your end as well. We are comparing numbers. Option two, I'm just showing you numbers and showing you methodology. No practices in your work. Okay, a few more responses. Let's make it representative, statistically representative. Or let's get a quorum. Okay. Okay, sweet. Thank you, guys. So basically, we will have a small number of in-class practices tomorrow. So just, again, make sure that you are all set up for success. Cool. So then in terms of our communications and everything else and the format, is there any feedback so I can incorporate for the remaining 2 days, as well as to our communications via emails? If you have some, please let me know, because there are 2 days ahead. So I just want to make sure that everything works out well, not only on my end, but on your ends as well. Is that, does it mean that I do like a tremendously terrific work and there is no like things you want to discuss? Discussion of the assignment from last week would be useful in next 2 days. You're talking about assignment, Kenneth, you're talking about assignment 1, right? Okay, so answering to Kenneth's question, we do have 5 more minutes, so I can take you through it, guys. But it would be like a major, like the recap of things I was expecting you to achieve and the actual answers and the grades you will get probably on Monday or on Tuesday. Alexander, shall we send you something by email today? Any task? No, today, guys, you're chilling. Tomorrow, maybe, but then you will have 2 more assignments to work with and the exam. So don't want to overflood you. So do you guys want like a quick recap of the assignment for assignment 1 for the remaining 6 minutes? Okay. Yeah, okay. So 1 second, let me just quickly pull up some information on my end. 1 second. Pom, 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 pom. So just to make sure that we finished everything. Slide for today. This part with the homework, please disregard it because we accomplished this part with the search ads. So, but you know what? Yeah, don't worry about it. Again, if you want, feel free to send your stuff. For participation mark, don't worry, because I saw all the list of students who were present today, because there were a lot of communications. Again, if you want just to obtain some sort of a feedback, just let me know. Sorry, guys, just changing my mind on a fly. So again, not mandatory, but feel free to send it if you like. And then the speaker will be here in next 15 minutes. So I'm just right now opening the case. 1 moment. So first of all, how difficult was this assignment for you? Like on a scale from 1 to 10, just drop a note in the comment section so I can just basically debrief you a bit. Any other people? I was just seeing only 2 responses. Alexander Holovan, not an excuse. You had 2 weeks to accomplish this assignment. I'm not buying that. Sorry. Well, different backgrounds again. Wasn't 2 hours. No, sorry. I'm talking about assignment 1. 1 is being easy, 10 is being difficult. Sure, just to make sure that we're on the right scale. 1 very easy, 10 very difficult, that scale. Okay, so overall, for this case, what I wanted you guys to do, first of all, because we all were dealing with numbers which were pre-populated. So I hope you still remember that template, Excel template we use just for, first of all, for identifying the segments and then preparing typing market insights or findings based on those segments in order to change those segments into market segments using for segmentation as well as for hypothesis development. So you were dealing with the actual survey data. The actual data as simple as that. So basically, there are 2 things you were able to check. So first of all, some of you were asking questions. Some of you were asking questions on, for example, how many segments should I have, or how should I come up with my own like hypothesis. So first of all, you were able to segment that data in perfect form because you have a bunch of time and it's your full-time job by using Python, R, or any other programming or statistical languages. So you're identifying the major attributes. So for the question 8, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, when you're having the certain number of segments you want to define, for example, 7 and 4 segments, I just decided to keep it very broad. So that was the reason I decided to choose this particular case. So you can play with your imagination as well as just think what you're comfortable with in terms of saying that, okay, this metric makes sense based on my business knowledge, or this metric is irrelevant completely because I'm not really interested in, for example, people who don't spend that significant amount of money. So I can just disregard this segment. So when you're articulating or using 2 types of rationales to justify that, okay, this segment is better than another segment, you also need to think what makes those segments distinct, what kind of attributes. So the main task was, first of all, for me to give you guys the actual work on cleaning up the data, organizing, structuring, trying to answer certain questions based on the segment distance. Then the second one was kind of to make you think on, okay, we have this survey data structured in this way. How can I, from that structured / unstructured data, make impactful recommendations for my particular business or for business which was presented in this case? And therefore, once I'm the person who is willing to work with those segments or this is segment identification, I can change those results and basically write a summary of all my findings in order to present it to someone or to share with someone. So basically that was the whole purpose of this assignment, because we did the legwork before when we were talking about theoretical concepts in details. Then we did hands-on practice using that Excel template. And then we were, for this assignment, we were working only with 2 main things: formatting our data, answering some questions which we may get based on the structured data, as well as writing recommendations and segment definitions in order for us to come up with insights, business recommendation, as well as testing hypothesis. Cool. So the actual mark and the actual feedback, I will be sharing with you personally if I have some in Moodle. So basically you will get the comment section for your grades. I have the accurate answer for all the questions except question 8 and question 9. So for those questions, I will need to look and to see what kind of rationals you were using on your end, and was it clear for me or not. And if there are some questions, I will may be reaching out to you. And question 9, it's an open question. So whatever you think it was accurate or better way of doing things, yeah, just segment description. So for me, it's just to understand how you approach the situation, as well as how you transform all data findings into actual solution. Does it make sense? Thumb ups so I can see you. Okay, sweet. So right now we have 7 minutes before our guest speaker shows up. So please take a break. For all the people who are interested in, please remain on the line. We will be starting in 7 minutes. I probably will be present for the first 20 minutes and then I will bounce because I have some other business to take care of. But for the main part, thank you for the day. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to send me via emails or just make sure that we have in the dialog box on here. Thank you for the day. Bye now.